September 2nd, 2023, 3:30 a.m. in Zapopan. Home security cameras capture three masked men beating rapper Lefty SM. Now, the footage shows one attacker raising his gun and firing a single shot that ends the rapper's life as his wife watches in horror. Here are some rappers who instantly got tortured and killed by brutal cartels. Let's take it to April 19th, 2018. Dawn breaks over an abandoned parking lot in Guadalajara, Mexico. Local residents discover a horrific sight.
Cruce de las calles Hacienda El Encero y Plácido Vega de la colonia Tetlán Río Verde del municipio de Guadalajara fue localizado el cuerpo de una persona envuelto en cobijas y con un mensaje amenazante.
The mutilated body belonged to Mr. Yosie Locote, a key player in Mexico's growing rap scene. A screwdriver embedded into his chest, as next to him would lie a note reading, "This is going to happen to all those who keep supporting Cholo." Just 2 days earlier, Yosie had been shopping at a local market, completely unaware that sicarios were watching his every move. But in a matter of hours, he'd be snatched off the streets in broad daylight, never to be seen alive again. Born in Bakersfield, California in 1976, Yosie Locote made his mark in Mexico's rap scene with hits like Balazos and Esto y Lo Otro. Then came his big break, a record deal with U.S. label Circulo Asesino, turning him into a rising star. But music wasn't Yosie's only connection to the streets. After moving to Guadalajara, he joined Florence 13, a gang that had moved into Mexico when the U.S. deported hundreds of its members in an operation nicknamed Joker's Wild. And it's this connection that would eventually lead him into the way of one of Mexico's most dangerous men. The streets of Guadalajara belong to the Jalisco New Generation Cartel. Now, they started as simple farmers growing avocados before steadily growing into Mexico's most feared organization. And it's easy to see just why no one wants to mess with them. When their convoys would roll through town, people saw an army, not a cartel. The soldiers marched in full tactical gear, carrying weapons that could tear through armored vehicles. They even built their own tanks and hid in workshops, massive armored monsters that crushed everything in their path. And in 2015, they showed exactly what they were capable of.
The Jalisco New Generation Cartel took the fight to the next level, shooting down a military helicopter with a rocket-propelled grenade.
We heard a boom, like a bomb. They took down the aircraft. They took it down.
But then came the split. Carlos El Cholo Sanchez, one of CJ&G's top lieutenants, broke away to start his own cartel called La Nueva Plaza. That betrayal sparked a war that saw Guadalajara's murder rate explode. And by 2018, the fighting between cartels claimed 2,420 lives. That's 5 times more than normal, as both sides fought for control of the city's drug trade. This is when Yosie makes the fatal mistake of publicly choosing sides. He decides to show his loyalty to El Cholo in every way possible. He starts wearing blue bandanas, the trademark look of the Sureño gang, and his music videos become propaganda for El Cholo's faction, with every new song spreading their message further into CJ&G territory. Now, the bulk of CJ&G's power comes from fear. Their victims serve as billboards, warning others of what happens to traitors. So, when someone like Yosie openly supports their enemies through music, the message has to be especially cruel. And it was. On April 17th, Yosie walked through Oblatos Market, not knowing that he was doing so for the last time. CJ&G sicarios had spent weeks learning about his routine. They knew when he shopped, where he went, and most importantly, when he dropped his guard. Finally, they struck. The kidnapping happened in seconds, and Yosie simply disappeared into one of the cartel's safe houses. 48 hours go by with no word from him. His friends, family, and fans were worried, hoping that he might still be alive, but the cartel had other plans. After 2 days, the morning shift at a parking lot found what was left of him. His body parts were wrapped in blankets scattered across the pavement. The CJ&G had taken Yosie apart piece by piece, a screwdriver pinned to his chest, along with their message. This is going to happen to all those who keep supporting Cholo. And not a single arrest has been made to this day. Who exactly carried out that hit remains a mystery, though everyone knows that the CJ&G ordered it. Yosie's mistake was simple. He thought his music made him powerful enough to pick sides in a cartel war. And in Guadalajara, that kind of mistake can only be made once. So while Yosie's story ended in pieces, our next case shows how even driving a luxury car in the wrong neighborhood can get you killed. It's August 12th, 2024. At 3:30 a.m., gunfire shatters the silence of Campestre, one of Juarez's most exclusive neighborhoods. A black Porsche sits in the middle of the street, its windshield riddled with 24 bullet holes. Inside, emerging rapper Besso and his companion, Toribio Hernandez, slump lifeless in their seats. Just 2 days earlier, though, Besso had posted his latest song, not knowing that it would be his last. And the timing wasn't coincidental either. Less than a month had passed since the shocking arrest of Ismael El Mayo Zambada, the last old guard leader of the Sinaloa cartel. His arrest threw the cartels into chaos. With no one in charge, rival groups started fighting for control. Cities like Juarez turned into battlegrounds, and Besso's execution was as brutal as you'd expect. Miguel Amador Zubia Martinez, known to his fans as Besso, had been making waves in the local rap scene. But in the aftermath of El Mayo's arrest, any connection to the cartels could mean a death sentence. With the old alliances crumbling, nobody was safe. After the tragic death of rapper Besso, CSI would later collect 34 bullet casings from the scene. The killers had unleashed a hail of gunfire on Calzada de Sanuco and Fresno streets, not caring that they were in one of the city's wealthiest areas, filled with mansions and fancy fences. The location of the hit sent a clear message. If sicarios could execute someone in Campestre, they could strike anywhere. So this was a show of force, a reminder that the rules were changing in the post-Mayo era. State officials tried to downplay the connection, though. They pointed to a 33% decrease in homicides during the first days of August compared to July. But the numbers told a very different story. 700 killings since the start of the year, with 90% linked to organized crime. And behind closed doors, law enforcement knew that El Mayo's arrest had destabilized the entire region. The Chihuahua State Police had been on high alert since El Mayo's capture, watching for signs of the inevitable power struggle. And Besso's murder, carried out with military precision in one of the city's safest neighborhoods, had confirmed their worst fears. 2 days after the shooting, Besso's latest music video remained on YouTube, a digital ghost haunting the platform. But bullets aren't the only way cartels silence voices in Mexico's rap scene, because sometimes they turn the artists themselves into killers. March 19th, 2018. 3 film students in Guadalajara work on their school project at what appears to be an abandoned ranch. Within hours, their lives would end in vats of acid. When the authorities finally made an arrest, fans couldn't believe the news. The man accused of carrying out such atrocities was none other than QBA, one of Mexico's fastest rising rap stars. And from behind bars, he was about to expose the secrets of Mexico's most feared cartel. QBA's rise in Mexico's rap scene seemed like a classic success story. His YouTube channel had over 300,000 subscribers who tuned in to watch his unfiltered take on life in Guadalajara's dangerous streets. He pioneered the genre known as rap malandro, or thug rap, a style that captured the violence and chaos of Mexico's drug war. His music videos showed young people roaming through poor neighborhoods and dealing drugs. But what his fans didn't know was that these weren't just music videos. They were glimpses into QBA's real life. Now, despite his online fame, QBA was barely making ends meet. Behind the scenes, his record label was keeping most of his earnings, leaving him desperate for money. That's when the CJNG spotted their opportunity, and they offered him a simple job that paid $150 a week. The catch? He had to dissolve their victims in acid. That March afternoon changed everything. 3 film students, Javier Salomon Aceves, 25, and his friends Daniel Diaz and Marco Avalos, both 20, were working on a school project near what looked like an abandoned house. They didn't know that they'd accidentally stumbled onto CJNG territory. QBA and 2 other cartel members were also nearby, and when they spotted the 3 students, they immediately assumed that they must have been spies from a rival cartel, and within minutes, the students were grabbed and taken to a cartel hideout. For hours, QBA watched as his associates tortured Salomon, trying to get information while his friends were just forced to watch. And when they finally realized that they were, in fact, just innocent students working on a film project, it didn't make a difference. They had seen too much, so the order came down that they had to be disposed of. And after torturing Salomon to death, the cartel killed his 2 friends as well. Then it was QBA's turn to do his job. He poured sulfuric acid into large vats and dropped the bodies in. Within hours, nothing was left, not even their bones. And for a month. The students' families searched everywhere to no avail. But these 3 missing students were too big to ignore. Their disappearances sparked massive protests across Mexico. And as pressure mounted on authorities, QBA was finally arrested. Then something unprecedented happened. He started talking.
Mexican rapper QBA has confessed to disposing of the bodies of 3 missing film students in sulfuric acid for the Jalisco New Generation Cartel.
Oh, but he didn't stop there. QBA starts spilling CJ&G's secrets too. He told them everything about the cartel, where they made their drugs, how they moved across the border, and how they found desperate people like him and turned them into killers. Now QBA's sitting in Puente Grande prison, facing 140 years behind bars. But his sentence might be the least of his worries. You see, the CJ&G doesn't forget betrayal, and their reach extends deep into Mexico's prison system. So, every single day could be QBA's last. His case has sparked a movement amongst his fans and his peers, even releasing music in his honor, most notably Free QBA by the artist A.B. Perez. The city of Guadalajara stands divided, with some seeing him as a whistleblower exposing cartel operations, yet others can't help but view him as a monster who took away innocent lives. His music videos, which are still online, have taken on a much darker meaning. The violence he rapped about wasn't just lyrics, it was his reality. And in the end, QBA's story differs from other victims of cartel violence. He was transformed from a promising artist into a cartel executioner, and finally into their worst enemy, a snitch. But while QBA counts his days in prison, our next case leaves nothing to the imagination, as security cameras capture this rapper's final breath. September 2nd, 2023, 3 masked men enter a house in Zapopan, Jalisco, where rapper Juan Carlos Sauceda, known as Lefty SM, lives with his wife. Minutes later, gunshots are heard throughout the neighborhood. Security cameras capture every moment of this execution. And now, years later, not a single arrest has been made. Just hours before, Lefty had been living the life he'd worked so hard to build. His signature style, patriotic themes mixed with hard-hitting beats, had carved him a unique place in Mexico's rap scene. At his shows, he'd perform draped in the Mexican flag, a symbol of national pride that ended up becoming his trademark. Now, unlike many artists getting caught up in cartel violence, Lefty maintained a clean image. He focused on his craft and built a devoted following through talent rather than controversy. But unfortunately, staying neutral sometimes makes no difference. Security footage would later reveal the brutality of his final moments. The attackers beat Lefty mercilessly before one of them, later identified as Luis Mario Plasencia, fired the fatal shot. During the struggle, a hat fell from one of the killers, a crucial piece of evidence that would later be recovered by Lefty's own family. And in the aftermath of this shooting, details of Lefty's final moments emerged. His wife, Ezzy Mary, who watched the murder unfold, quickly took to social media in a now deleted post to set the record straight. In reality, they came to kill you. Envious people. The message was clear. This was a planned hit, not a random crime. Someone had marked Lefty for death. And now, with law enforcement making no progress, Lefty's family decided to launch their own investigation. His brother had combed the crime scene, finding the killer's hat and the bullet that had passed through Lefty's body. They handed over security footage showing the entire attack and even offered 300,000 peso reward for information leading to Plasencia's capture. But even with this evidence, including clear identification of the shooter, the Jalisco State Attorney's Office remains inactive. Today, Lefty's social media accounts sit frozen in time. His last posts show a man at the peak of his career, unaware that his success would lead to his execution. But while rappers like Lefty learn to fear the cartels, this next story is different. Let's go to May 15th, 1992. On stage at a packed venue in Culiacan, Mexico, folk singer Chalino Sanchez reads a note handed to him from the crowd. The color drains from his face. He wipes sweat from his forehead, crumples the paper in his fist, and then resumes singing. Now, they say that note was a death threat, but instead of running, Chalino gave what witnesses called the performance of his lifetime, but it would also be his last. Chalino Sanchez's life story was always riddled with violence. Born in a tiny ranch near Culiacan, He was the youngest of 8 children, living in deep poverty. By 1975, when he was 11, his sister was assaulted at a party by a local drug lord named El Chapo Perez. Then, 4 years later, at age 15, Chalino gets his revenge. He tracked down Perez at a party and shot him on sight. After hiding in the hills for 2 weeks, he fled to Los Angeles, knowing he'd become a marked man. Chalino's life changed once he got to America. He helped his brother Armando smuggle immigrants across the border for extra cash. Now that business was pretty dangerous, and Chalino would get caught up in cartel activities. Soon enough, he'd be arrested and sentenced to 8 months in prison. Now behind bars, Chalino found his true calling. He met his cousin, a guitar player, and then discovered his talent for turning real stories into songs. The prisoners would gather around, share their stories, and Chalino would turn their lives into lyrics. And soon enough, Chalino realized that he could trade these songs in for money and favors from other inmates. And word of this spread fast. Drug traffickers started paying him to write their stories. They offered money, watches, and even custom pistols. Soon, Chalino was performing across California and drawing in massive crowds. But his success came with a price. He refused to pick sides, telling stories about any cartel that would pay. And in the drug world, that kind of independence was dangerous. By early 1992, Chalino sensed his time was running out. So he sold his guns and started taking quick money instead of contracts. He even sold the rights to his music for $115,000, songs that would later be worth millions. His wife later said that he was putting his affairs in order, knowing that his death was just around the corner. On May 15, 1992, Chalino was performing at a packed venue when someone from the crowd handed him a note. He froze for a second, wiped the sweat from his face and crumpled the paper, and just kept singing. Nobody in the crowd knew they were watching his final performance that night. And after the show, Chalino left this venue in a car with his brothers and a cousin. They make it to this traffic circle before 2 Chevy Suburbans with police lights forced him to stop. Men in uniforms surround him, but we all know they weren't real cops. When they started pulling out one of Chalino's brothers, he offered him money and claimed that they were just fans he'd met at the show. The hitman bought the lie and let the others go. Then they told Chalino that their commander wanted to talk. Everyone knew what that meant in Culiacan, but Chalino went anyway. One last sacrifice to keep his family safe. He climbed into one of the Suburbans, never to be seen alive again. Farmers had found him dead near this irrigation canal. The killers had blindfolded him and tied his wrists before putting an end to his life. But even facing death, Chalino stayed defiant. It is said that when he was ordered to kneel and beg for forgiveness, Chalino told the hitman he only kneels before God and his mother. Those were his last words before 2 bullets struck the back of his head. But now, not every artist would be as defiant as Chalino. Some would choose to duck for cover when the cartels come calling.
Popular Mexican singer postponing several shows because of death threats.
September 10th, 2023. A crowd of 100,000 people erupts as Peso Pluma takes the stage at a Mexico City music festival. During that performance, he leads the audience in chanting JGL, the initials of Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. But just 2 days later, death threats appear across Tijuana. The message is clear: cancel your upcoming show or else. Banners signed by the CJNG were hung over bridges throughout the city. They warned Pluma not to perform at his October 14th concert at Estadio Caliente, calling it his last show if he dared to appear. And that's because, for the CJNG, Peso's tribute to El Chapo was an unforgivable act of disrespect. Hassan Emilio Cabande, known as Peso Pluma, wasn't just another rapper. His album Genesis had made history, reaching number 3 on Billboard's all-genre chart, the highest position ever for regional Mexican music. And with billions of Spotify streams and a massive international following, he was Mexico's biggest breakthrough star. But in Tijuana, that meant nothing. The city was CJNG territory, and they saw Peso's homage to El Chapo, former leader of the rival Sinaloa Cartel, as a direct challenge to their authority. The fact that Peso even came from Zapopan, Jalisco, CJNG's home turf, made the perceived betrayal even worse.
Biggest right now, Peso Pluma, the biggest narco corrido singer, is dedicated several songs to the Chapitos. They like to be in the limelight. They like to be narcos.
When reporters tried to discuss the threats, Peso hung up on them. His social media remained defiant, suggesting the show would go on. But behind the scenes, his security team was facing an impossible situation. The CJ&G had a history of following up on their threats. Just months earlier, the band Grupo Arriesgado had learned this the hard way. After similar warnings, gunmen had attacked them at a Tijuana mall where they were signing autographs. The CJ&G had left yet another banner at the scene. The message, always the same: respect our territory or face the consequences. Now, Peso Pluma was at the peak of his career, selling out stadiums across the world. His fusion of traditional Mexican music with modern sounds had earned him a following that crossed borders. His song Siempre Pendientes spoke from the perspective of a loyal Sinaloa cartel member protecting El Chapo. The lyrics that had helped make him famous had now painted a target on his back. Yet despite the initial defiance and the sold-out stadium waiting for him, Peso Pluma eventually backed down. His team knew that in Mexico's cartel territories, even being the country's biggest music star offers no protection, and that sometimes survival means knowing when to back down. But while Peso Pluma chose to step back from the threat, not every artist is going to make that same choice. And sometimes, the consequences can be far more brutal. May 24, 2000, outside a house in Queens, New York, a grandmother tends to her garden. Her grandson, Curtis Jackson, sits nearby. In seconds, 9 bullets would tear through his body. Yet somehow, Curtis manages to survive and goes on to become one of the most recognizable names in hip-hop, 50 Cent. Now, before this shooting, Curtis was just another kid from Queens trying to make it in rap. Growing up in South Jamaica's rough streets, he lived with his grandmother after his mother was murdered when he was 8. Ever since then, music and hustling became his way out, and by 2000, he'd caught the attention of Jam Master Jay and was about to release his first single, How to Rob, a song that mocked big-name rappers. But someone else had noticed him too. Now, 50 Cent had grown up in Queens, where Kenneth Supreme McGriff's drug empire controlled everything. The Supreme Team gang had hundreds of members and moved drugs throughout the 5 boroughs of New York. And in Queens, McGriff's word was law. Now, McGriff ran his organization like a corporation, and anyone who threatened his business ended up dead. So, when 50 Cent's lyrics started hitting too close to home, McGriff decided to send a message. He wanted to show what happens to people who spoke about his operations, even in songs. That May afternoon started normally for the Jackson family.
Right behind me is my grandmother's home. I came out like 12 o'clock in the afternoon, May 24th. She was bent over, actually planting flowers in the garden, and I walked over here to sit.
But then everything exploded into violence.
The car pulled up. On the side of us, a guy got out the passenger seat of that car, came around behind it, and shot through the actual car.
9 bullets struck 50 Cent at close range, in his hand, arm, hip, both legs, chest, and left cheek. 1 bullet lodged so close to his jaw that it permanently affected his voice, giving him the slurred speech he's known for today.
It's a life-threatening situation. It's just not. I've seen people go into the hospital under circumstances that were way less intense and not come out.
Against all odds, 50 Cent survived, and people started calling him superhuman.
It doesn't hurt as much as people imagine it hurts because of your adrenaline and how the shock of what's actually going on, it hurts after.
The police and media pressed him to name names, but 50 Cent stayed silent. Instead of seeking revenge, he channeled everything into his music.
I got tired of, in the recovery process, I got tired of being afraid. And then the only way that I could, to cover those emotions were to be a little more aggressive.
And insensitive.
Recovery took 5 months. 50 Cent had learned to walk again, but he also learned something else, how to turn pain into power. He started writing with new intensity. His mixtapes caught Eminem's attention, leading to $1 million deal. Songs like Into Club and Candy Shop topped charts worldwide, and the rest is hip-hop history.
Who has more cred than you, living after being shot 9 times?
I don't know what the criteria are for street credibility. Or
That's
if
it.
If there's something that creates more merit for you. I looked at that experience as something that was unfortunate.
Today, 50's built an empire spanning TV shows, movies, and business ventures. The shooting that was meant to end his career only made him stronger. And as for McGriff, he's now serving life in prison. He didn't just fail to kill 50 that day. In doing so, he accidentally created a legend.